Before we start the question and answer, let me repeat, with your permission, what I said last night. On behalf of the poor in Africa and everyone involved in agricultural development, I express my gratitude, passion and commitment that you and your family have brought, both your resources and your commitments to the cause of the poor in the African continent. For my first question, last March, your staff invited me to Seattle for a dialogue. I told your staff that unless they make the national programs front and center and challenge leaders of the developing world, particularly Africa, to commit meaningfully and in earnest, we may not achieve your goal of a transformative change in the livelihood of Africans. In that vein, I pointed out to the fact that, in my view, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation can be a leader and a game changer, and I had said this in public multiple times. And you can be so if you use effectively and efficiently each of the two capitals that your foundation brings to agreement. The first capital is this unprecedented that you've already committed. The second in mind is the trust and credibility it brings to the world of the poor. I think that you've earned in the minds of many Africans the convening power to bring people together, particularly African leaders, to the table for earnest commitment and dedication to bring the resources and policy decisions for the cause of agricultural development. And my question to you, you have eloquently described the need for people to get together and to do this. And tonight, the inspiration you gave all of us is a great example. Would you and Melinda be willing to engage with leaders of Africa in this kind of dialogue?
Well, that's a great question. It's certainly our goal to do that in the best way that we can. And I'd say it'll take several days.
Thank you. In your speech, you also called for people with vastly different opinions to come together around a vision of agricultural development. What would it take to get that achieved?
Well, I think one of the things is that this will be most concrete as people are actually seeing the progress in the new science. I'll apply that here as well.
I'm not sure if we have more time, but that's, technology is, as a vehicle of change, has tremendous power. As you indicated, that these problems are getting complex. I have an understanding that you came to agriculture believing that addressing the health issue alone may not fully address the poor in Africa. And so this holistic approach is what is really necessary, an integrated approach towards the problem, and as you indicated, bringing people together. And that's why I am advocating the fact that you have, in the person of Kofi Annan, the most respectable African in the program. He can knock at anybody's door and get attention from African leaders. And I pledge the name, your name and your family name, working both on the front in Africa as well as in the developed world, where people who are making commitments, similar commitments to the cause of the poor, can come together, begin to make this, as many are now beginning to say, to make this country-led program and activity. And I pledge that you would be a willing participant in that dialogue.
No, absolutely, and that's the great thing about the leadership at AGRA and having Kofi involved is, they're there in Africa, they know the leaders, And so as things are being done well, they can make sure the right praise and reinforcement is there. It's to be done well. So it's our voice in particular, but then we get the leverage as we've been able to back great people and show them what can be done. And for us to come to agriculture, it was really a progression of things. We first started on population issues, and that got us into health. And then when we got into health, we were learning about nutrition and some of the challenges. And I read the Gordon Conway book, and we let some people come in and tell us the story. The Dr. Borlaug story first and foremost, but many others as well. And that's what said to us, it really has that same paradigm, that if you have good governance, if you take a long-term approach, science is a piece of it, but you can have this very dramatic impact. And so, that's why I think it's great to be here with this group, making the commitment to work with those national programs that you've asked for.
Well, one of the weakest institutions in Africa is the private sector. And one of my hopes is that we would make this assertion, public and private partnership is important. I think there is gradual recognition happening. While someone like Kofi Annan can really, with confidence, affirm the value of public institutions and the commitment of government to development. And my hope is you have the credibility to speak about the power of the private sector in terms of catalyzing that kind of activity in Africa as well.
Yeah, the role of the private sector, if the private sector is unleashed, it can do amazing things. And so a lot of these government policies have to do with deciding what the government needs to do to enable that to happen. And so it's both the local private sector and then it's other private sector actors coming into Africa, making investments as well. And so I do think we're starting to see the beginnings of that with a lot of the responsible companies.
I want to be clear, Bill Gates can speak as long as he wants at the Borlaug Dialogue, but I promised him, and he asked me to promise him that we'd stay on time because he's got a strong schedule to follow. Thank you both very, very, very much. Thank you.